My name is Louise. I'm 32, and I work as a trauma therapist in Boston. 7 years ago, on the night of my 25th birthday, my life changed forever. My stepfather, Frank, a man who had terrorized our family for more than a decade, broke into my apartment in a drunken rage. He dislocated my shoulder while my mother stood there and watched. Before I tell you how that night transformed my life, let me know where you're watching from, and please subscribe if you want more stories about overcoming adversity. My childhood was peaceful until I turned 8. That's when my biological father died from aggressive lung cancer, leaving my mother, Diane, and me to figure out life on our own. For 4 years, it was just us in our small suburban home outside Boston. Mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, but she always made time for me Friday movie nights, baking cookies on weekends, never missing a single school event. Those were hard years, but our bond grew stronger in the struggle. Everything changed when I was 12. Mom met Frank at the bank where she'd just started working as a teller. He was the branch manager, respectable, steady, polished. I still remember the first time she brought him home. He arrived with flowers for my mom and a book about astronomy for me after hearing I loved the stars. He was charming, attentive, and genuinely seemed to want to know me. I was hesitant, still grieving my dad, but Frank never pushed. He took it slow, inviting me along to the zoo and the museum. After 6 months, Frank proposed. They married when I was 13. The wedding was small but elegant, exactly what Mom had always wanted. Frank had money, far more than we were used to, and he moved us into his spacious colonial in an upscale neighborhood. I got my own room, a new computer, a bookshelf stocked with novels. For a little while, it felt like a dream. The changes were subtle at first. Frank insisted on managing all the finances. He convinced Mom to close her personal bank account and merge everything with his. He had explanations for everything more efficient, lower fees. We're a family now. Mom agreed, maybe too eager to believe she'd found security again. Then came his opinions about Mom's friends. Karen was too gossipy. Susan, fresh from a divorce, was a bad influence. Jennifer spent too frivolously. One by one, Mom's social circle shrank. Phone calls trickled off. Visits stopped. I watched Mom change, too. The woman who once sang in the kitchen now moved silently. She checked with Frank before making any purchase, even small ones. Her bright wardrobe gave way to conservative clothes Frank deemed appropriate. She put away the red lipstick she'd loved for years. I saw Frank's anger for the first time when I was 14. Mom bought a simple sundress without asking him. It wasn't expensive, just something for a staff picnic. Frank exploded. He didn't hit her, not that time, but he hurled his dinner plate at the wall. It shattered, spaghetti sauce sliding down our cream-colored wallpaper like blood. He called her irresponsible, reckless, ungrateful. Mom apologized over and over, returned the dress the next day, and never shopped alone again. By the time I started high school, I had a strategy: avoid Frank at all costs. I joined every after-school club, studied at the library, spent weekends at friends' houses. At home, I stayed in my room with the door closed, emerging only when necessary. He never forbade these activities. If anything, he seemed to prefer me out of the way. My relationship with Mom deteriorated. I resented her for changing, for letting Frank come between us. When I tried to talk to her about how controlling he was, she brushed me off. "You don't understand adult relationships," she'd say. "Frank takes care of us. We're lucky to have him." Eventually, I stopped trying. We lived under the same roof, but in separate worlds. In my junior year, I walked in on Mom, covering a bruise on her cheek with makeup. She claimed she'd walked into a door in the dark, but she wouldn't meet my eyes in the mirror. That's when I knew Frank had moved from emotional to physical abuse. I begged her to leave. She refused. "It was a one-time mistake," she said. He's been stressed at work. I knew better. But at 16, I felt powerless to save someone who wouldn't save herself. The next 2 years became a careful dance of planning and survival. I kept perfect grades, education was my ticket out. I researched colleges far from home, applied for every scholarship, and worked part-time at a local bookstore to save money. Frank seemed pleased with my academic success, taking it as proof of his good parenting, and he mostly left me alone. Mom grew more withdrawn, a shadow of the woman who'd once been my best friend. When my acceptance to Boston University arrived, along with a substantial scholarship, I finally felt like I could breathe. Frank was surprisingly supportive. My achievements made him look good, and maybe he was eager to have me out of the house. Mom seemed torn between pride and fear. The night before I left for college, she came to my room after Frank fell asleep. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, sitting on the edge of my bed like she used to when I was little. "You're going to do amazing things." There was a longing in her voice that made my chest ache. "Come with me," I blurted out. "We can get an apartment together. You can find a job in Boston." She shook her head, resignation settling over her face. "This is my life now, Louise. But it doesn't have to be yours. Promise me you'll build a good life." The next morning, Frank drove us to Boston in tense silence. He carried my boxes up to my dorm, playing the devoted stepfather for my roommate and her parents. When it was time to go, Mom hugged me tightly and whispered, "I love you." Frank gave me an awkward pat on the shoulder and a check for emergencies. I never cashed it. My first semester felt like emerging from a cave into sunlight. I made friends who knew nothing about my home life, joined study groups, even tried out for the debate team. My roommate Zoe, a journalism major, introduced me to her eclectic group of friends. For the first time in years, I felt normal, free from the constant tension. I declared psychology as my major sophomore year, driven by a need to understand. Why did Mom stay? Why did Frank need control? Could I have done anything differently? My professors noticed my intensity. One, Professor Sarah Levine, a specialist in trauma and domestic violence, became my mentor and later a friend. During office hours one day, I finally opened up about my family. She didn't pity me. She offered understanding and practical steps, books to read, support groups to try, and encouragement to start therapy. "The patterns we grow up with shape us," she said, "but they don't have to define us. Understanding them is the first step to breaking free." Talking to Mom became increasingly difficult during those years. Our calls were brief and superficial, always when Frank was at work. She avoided anything real, deflecting with vague, "everything's fine" answers. I went home for holidays freshman year, but the air in the house was so thick with fear, I found excuses to stay on campus after that. Mom would visit occasionally, always alone, always glancing over her shoulder as if Frank could materialize behind her. To support myself, I worked 20 hours a week at the university library. The quiet order of the stacks soothed me, and my supervisor was flexible with my schedule. I was determined to be financially independent. I lived frugally, shopped at thrift stores, and learned to cook cheap, healthy meals in the dorm kitchen. During junior year, I met Eric in abnormal psych. He was studying to become a clinical social worker, passionate about helping at-risk youth. Unlike the guys I dated casually, Eric was patient and perceptive. He noticed when certain topics made me flinch and never pushed. Slowly, I opened up. "Your mom needs help," he said gently after I'd told him enough. "But so do you. Having a parent in an abusive relationship affects you even from a distance." With his encouragement, I started therapy through the University Counseling Center. Dr. Melissa helped me work through the tangled knot of love, anger, guilt, fear. I began to understand that I couldn't save my mom if she wasn't ready to leave, but I could build a healthy life of my own. I graduated summa cum laude. Professor Levine wrote glowing recommendations for graduate programs. Mom sat alone at my ceremony, Frank claimed a work emergency. She looked older than 47, gray threading through her brown hair, her posture slightly stooped as if bracing for a blow. We had dinner at a small Italian place near campus. "I always knew you'd do something special," she said, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. "Your father would have been so proud." I took her hand. "I'm staying in Boston. I found an apartment and a job at a community mental health center. Come visit whenever you want. Stay as long as you need." She squeezed my hand, then let go to fuss with her napkin. "I'll try. Things are just busy. With Frank's schedule, the house." Her voice trailed off. She didn't want to make promises she couldn't keep. We hugged tightly and made tentative plans for the summer. As I watched her cab disappear, I wondered if I'd ever have my real mother back. After graduation, I moved into a one-bedroom in a converted brownstone in Somerville, a short subway ride from downtown. The rent stretched my budget, but having my own secure space was worth it. My job at Riverside Community Mental Health Center was entry-level assisting licensed therapists and occasionally sitting in on group sessions. The pay was modest, but the experience was invaluable, especially alongside part-time grad courses in clinical psychology. 6 months into my new life, I got a message from Eric. We'd broken up a